Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia review. And today we'll be talking about the latest episode to drop, Sad Man's Parade, which follows up on the battles set up in the previous episode, as well as giving us a glimpse at Twice's pre-villain life and seeing what an immense beast of a man he can be when he overcomes his trauma. For a character that's basically been exclusively used as comic relief in the past, with only the occasional serious scene, this episode really flipped his characterization on his head and really got to the heart of the character, whilst also giving him some much deserved character development, much like Revival Party did for Toga. Plus, we also got to see more group synergy within the League of Villains as a whole, so that was pretty nice to see. That being said though, I do need to say that I have read the manga and I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details. But for the purpose of these reviews, I really only like to talk about what the manga's presented up to now and not go back and forth between manga and anime. It just helps keep the review streamlined and allows anime only fans to watch along and join in too. And now, with all that being said, let's jump into it. We start off the episode right where Revival Party left off, with Skeptic's Jin puppets holding Twice down and preparing to kill Toga, which causes Twice to freak out, as Toga's probably his closest friend in the League of Villains, the one that's accepted him and his strange ways with the least judgment or cruelty. So yeah, right off the bat, we're getting some premium feels, which is odd because you'd think it would be hard to feel bad about the potential death of somebody like Toga, who's simply unrepentantly evil based on her backstory. But since we've seen this cute brother-sister type of interconnected bond form between these two characters, you're able to put aside the morality of the situation and really engage with the scene and feel bad for these characters. And in my opinion, that's pretty good storytelling all things considered. And this is where we get some long-awaited Twice backstory, and it was pretty sad. Probably not as sad as Shigaraki's backstory, but still sad and actually very tragic. Twice reflects that he's always had trouble fitting in, and that people have always been afraid of him because of his eyes. And honestly, I don't see what's wrong with his eyes, so I'm not sure what this is meant to mean, but okay. We then see him at age 16 being interviewed by the police for running somebody over despite him going the speed limit and the man running out onto the road. He tells the officers that he's alone and has no family around before being informed that he'll probably get a criminal record from all this. And then we see his boss beat him up, fire him, and kick him out of his home because the man he ran over was a big client. He goes on to think about how his parents died when he was in middle school and he got caught up in a life of crime and lived a lonely, isolated life. And in his loneliness, he created doubles to talk to, and eventually they made doubles, and so on, until he had his own little family that would help him with his crimes. Until, as we know, they turned on each other, and all of them died except for him, with each of them thinking that they were the original. And this of course left Twice unsure as to whether he was the original. And then this leads him to Giran, and eventually to the League of Villains. And this was just sad. He tried to do the right thing and live a normal life, but he kept getting screwed over by his circumstances. And eventually he had no choice but to turn to crime because he kept stumbling over life's hurdles. Plus he had no friends or family, and so literally had to be his own best friend. And then even he betrayed himself. God, it's such a sad life this guy's had so far. And of all of the villains, I think he has the most understandable backstory. And it's pretty heavily rooted in real world problems. He was trying to be a good person until he was down on his luck and so turned to simple crime. And once his doubles betrayed him, he went in search of comrades, which led him to his life as a supervillain. You can see how he got to this point, and you can understand his motivations even if you don't necessarily agree with what he's become a part of. And of course, this dedication to his team leads him to try and save Toga, despite him not wearing his mask, before he gets brutally beaten down by the puppets, who eventually break both of his arms, before they start twisting Toga's neck, intending to break it too. And obviously this was a fake out because they were not going to kill her off like that, but that would have been a very brutal death. And despite Skeptic thinking that breaking Twice's arms would make him submit, turns out it had the opposite effect, as it makes him realise that he is actually the original Twice, and so he's not going to disappear. And then this lets him power up, get control of his trauma, and unleash the most broken quirk outside of One for All and All for One. He makes copies of himself, who then make copies of themselves, who make copies of themselves, etc., etc., and unleashes on the Liberation Army with his Sad Man's Parade. And suddenly Giran's belief that he could take down the whole country makes a lot of sense, because almost nobody could take him out if he and his doubles just kept copying. Even top heroes would eventually get swept up under the weight of all those doubles, even if they are quite weak. And thus, in the blink of an eye, the League of Villains has a fighting chance, and Twice becomes potentially the most powerful member of the group so far, besides Gigantomachia. But is he really a member? And whilst all the doubles move out to save the day, wholesome original Twice stays with Toga to look after her. And this whole scene was just so awesome. And it was a strange feeling to actually be rooting hard for the villains. But then you see Twice dancing on rooftops at the sheer joy of overcoming his trauma, and you can't help but feel happy for him. Back at the Liberation Army base, Redestro decides that now is the perfect time to mock Skeptic, telling him that this is a rare failure for him, which very much triggers Skeptic because he's apparently only failed once ever in his life. Before Giran laughs at them, telling them that now his shackles are off, Twice can do anything. And first of all, I love this random bromance between Giran and Twice that's kind of come out of nowhere this arc. It's so cute that Giran's happy that Twice is getting over his trauma and feels bad about getting captured in the first place. And second of all, I hate Redestro. The dude's a trash leader, decides to declare war on the League of Villains for no reason at all, hides whilst one of his generals is killed, invites them to come fight when he should have just ambushed them without warning, and now mocks another one of his generals to his face. There's so many leadership blunders here, it makes me wish he would just get instantly dusted by Shigaraki. And then we see Darby versus Getten, and this was boring and disappointing. Yeah, I didn't expect much when it was first shown last episode, but I hoped for a bit of a cooler exchange. This was just a battle of two edgelords occasionally shooting fire or ice at the other one. Darby for me at this point is literally all talk. Never really does anything important or notable, and just broods and shoots the occasional fireball. It's not very impressive all things considered, especially since they seem to be setting him up for a much larger role going forward. And at this point we see the swarm of Twice arrive, striking poses and beating down on the Liberation Army, with Compress telling him to slow down because Gigantomachia still has over an hour until he wakes up, and they need some of the army still standing to help act as cannon fodder before they take him down. And then Getten actually does something worthwhile and takes out a huge number of the clones, before resuming his kind of underwhelming clash with Darby. Such a shame. But then we get to more of the good stuff as the Doctor wakes up Gigantomachia prematurely. So obviously, this is going to get hectic next episode. But side note, how does the Doctor know that they're in the middle of a battle in Daika City? Does he have surveillance tech on them or something? Did one of the League text him to tell them what's been going on? Who knows? We then cut to Shigaraki and Spinner, who are running through the streets towards Redestro's hideout, with Spinner giving some moral support to Shigaraki for coming to the city, telling him that they had to come fight, otherwise they would have been reported to the heroes by the MLA. And this scene actually made me sad, because they cut the beginning of the bromance and Spinner's story from this arc. And I doubt we're going to see it at this point. And that's such a shame. It added a lot to both his character and to Shigaraki's. And I know I say I don't talk about the manga, but come on, they can have a bikini beach episode, but not this. As the pair approach the tower, they find themselves attacked by even more enemies, only for the Twice doubles to arrive and save the day again, with even Shigaraki being shocked and pleased that Twice is powered up, before he sends the clones to clear a path to the tower, whilst also keeping enough fodder around for Gigantomachia. And also I noted that Shigaraki seemed pretty angry about what they'd done to Giran, and was unwilling to send Twice in there alone. Is that in case Giran's dead and Twice gets upset? Is he being nice? And then he seemed pretty furious about playing with people's hearts. Damn, I didn't think he cared one bit about his companions. And this is actually a pretty cool development, and a really cool contrast between his personality and Redestro's, and what makes for a compelling leader. And then Trumpet turns up and uses his quirk to hype up the Liberation Army to fight the Twice clones. And they set up that Spinner's going to go after him. And nothing much about that interests me at all. Spinner's not all that impressive, and neither is this guy. It's like comparing two brands of store-bought vanilla ice cream. It's not an interesting head-to-head. Especially after they cut out all that significant development for Spinner. There's just no reason to care. Darby and Getten got my hopes up and let me down, so I'm not going to get fooled again. Sorry. And then we finally get to see Redestro confront the villains, with a Twice clone making it to the building and making clones of Darby, Shigaraki and Compress, as well as himself, and then attacking Redestro, who insta-kills a clone, before telling Twice that if he makes more clones, Giran dies. And then Shigaraki takes control, and I guess this is what he meant before, that Twice would get manipulated into stopping because he wants to protect Giran, whereas the others would do what needs to be done. Thus, Shigaraki not wanting Twice to be alone was probably just more pragmatic than anything else, but I guess he's still come a long way since Season 1. The battle rages on, Redestro kills basically all of the clones, and then Twice cries when he sees that Giran's fingers from his smoking hand really are gone. And I'm loving how sweet Twice is. He'd be a good friend, apart from being a crazy criminal supervillain. If anyone was going to get a redemption, you'd want it to be him. And just as the final Twice clone's about to die, the Shigaraki clone reveals that he's still alive and attacks, leaving Redestro to monologue about the origin of quirks and his ancestor Destro. Because that's all he seems to know how to do, it seems. And I just can't wait for this dude to get his head kicked in. He's so preachy and so annoying. Like, I've never really cared that much about Shigaraki, but this guy has made me appreciate him on a whole new level. And then original Shigaraki trashes the tower with his quirk, bringing it tumbling down, with the preview setting up fights between Trumpet and Spinner, and Redestro and Shigaraki. So obviously we're in the endgame now. And this episode was really good. Like, so good. Great character development and story progression, and the fights were good for the most part. But did it feel rushed to anybody else? Like they had one episode, 2 at best, to wrap this up. It's kind of disappointing for the sole villain arc to be so short. They've done a pretty good job of getting the important details adapted right and doing them justice, but you can tell there are holes in the story that otherwise would have been more filled out if they'd chosen to adapt it more faithfully. I get that the heroes are the show's main draw, but I feel like they could have used some more time here. Even just 2 more episodes would have been so much more. That being said though, those are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.